We are joined now by the great Phil Steele of college football preview fame. Phil, thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
Hey, I am doing great. How about you, gentlemen, this morning?
Phil, we're great. I'm not going to kid you. The last couple of years, as Nebraska's been more cooperative, I feel like I've been replaced, man. I'm like the jilted ex-lover, man. But I'm glad that you're getting taken care of, man, because the information is fantastic.
Yeah, and for the listeners that don't know, there was a coach prior to Coach Rule that I didn't get a chance to talk to, and so Damon would fill me in as what's going on in practice. But now that Coach Rule's in charge, and I've talked to him when he was at Temple and at Baylor and here at Nebraska, it's a lot more refreshing. And Damon, I miss our conversations in the spring, though.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Anytime, man. I just want to be able to pick up the phone and be like, "Hey, you know what? This is pretty fantastic." How difficult has it been? I mean, the portal. You have to wait to go to press. You pride yourself on accuracy. Is it tougher or easier with information out there now?
Oh, it's a lot tougher, Damon, especially with the second portal window ending at the end of April. It used to be some teams ended their spring in March or early April, and I would always give the coaches like let's say a week to have their exit interviews with the players, then go over the rosters with the coach. Now I have to wait till the portal's closed. So now I'm trying to cram 136 head coaches into the month of May, which is almost impossible when you look at schedules. Hey, the coach, the school calls and says, hey, coach available at 2:00. Well, I got coach at 2, I got a coach at 3, I got a coach at 4. I mean, it's tough to fit them all in. But I got to talk to at least, I believe it was 125 of the 136 this year, but it dragged all the way into June. Normally the last week of the magazine, I do not talk to coaches, don't have time, but I'm like, I got all these coaches. Yeah, let's go ahead. We'll set them up. So I talked to like 12 more coaches in the first week of June, and I put the magazine a little bit behind, but the information to me is valuable. And it's probably my favorite part of the job is talking to the head coaches.
Mm. Phil, I got to ask because I think DB and I are both fascinated by the landscape of the contenders for the college football playoff this year. And I start right off the bat with the fact that basically none of the top contenders are returning a quarterback from last year. Maybe basically outside of Penn State, you've got Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, all breaking in new quarterbacks. Penn State obviously brings Drew Aller back. But how do you start to figure that out as you're going through this process when you've got so many unknowns, even once you do have the roster together?
Yeah, well, I've been doing it for 31 years, and for a lot of first-year head quarterbacks come in, do well. It depends on the surrounding talent. I mean, take a look at Oklahoma last year. They had 0 returning starters on the offensive line and a receiving corps that was down their top 5 receivers. So Jackson Arnold looked pretty poor last year as a starting quarterback. I think he'll play a lot better this year. Now that he's got my number 12 rated offensive line and my number 5 set of receivers at Auburn with him. And I also think Oklahoma's offense will be a lot better. So you have to look at the surrounding talent when it comes to quarterbacks. And let's take Notre Dame for an example. When you look at Notre Dame, they've got my number 2 set of running backs in the country, led by Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. They got my number 3 rated offensive line and number 14 set of receivers. So if you bring in a new quarterback, and they've got one of the top defenses in the country, one of the top teams, they don't have to go out and be Superman each and every week and win. Then I think it's good for their development, and I think a guy like C.J. Carr will do well. So I think you have to factor in with the new quarterbacks is what's the surrounding talent around them is just probably as key as their talent is as well. One other top team that does return their quarterback this year, by the way, Clemson with Cade Klubnik.
Yeah.
Yep.
Phil, let me ask you something. I want to stay with Oklahoma here just for a second before I get to another team that is in your top 12 most improved. And I think you'll know who I'm going to ask you about next because they are on Nebraska's schedule. But I want to stay with Oklahoma. That front four should be fantastic offensively. As you mentioned, they're better on paper. How critical or how big do you think that one is for Michigan? They get it at home. It seems like it's big for Brett Venables during this era if he wants to continue some upward momentum. Like, how are you looking at Oklahoma, especially early in that matchup with Michigan?
I like the Sooners in that game. In fact, I've got the Sooners, my number one surprise team in the country. And you talked about the most improved list, Damon. That's teams that had a losing record last year that I expect to have a winning record this year and have the biggest improvement in record. The other list I have is my surprise team list, which are non-top 10 teams. Nobody's really talking about them, but I feel they have a shot at making the playoff, and actually think Oklahoma has that opportunity. You go back to last year, Oklahoma played one of the toughest schedules in the country. I mean, they took on all the big boys in the SEC, and they only had 3 SEC home games last year because the Texas game is at a neutral site. Well, this year they only have 3 true SEC road games because the Texas game's at a neutral site. They finally get 4 SEC home games. They get that Michigan game at home as well. So it's a better home schedule for them. There's nothing wrong with their defense last year. They held opponents to 87 yards per game below their season average. Number 6 in the country. They got 8 starters back on D. Venables calling the defense.
That D-line is going to be silly.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you 100%, Dan. I got my number 1 rated defense line in the country with our Mason Thomas and Jaden Jackson. You look at them offensively. Their offensive line had 0 returning starters last year. They got Bill Benbaz, the offensive line coach, one of the best in the country. He's got a veteran group to work with. They're going to be vastly improved. You look at the receiving core, they were below average, a weakness last year because of all the injuries. Well, they get their injured players back. And I'm going to bring up Clemson as an example there. 2 years ago, Cade Klubnik had a banged-up receiving core. I mean, his top 3 receivers were out prior to the year, and he had 19 touchdowns.
Let's rejoin our guy, Phil Steele, though, as we continue our college football preview.
We left off on Oklahoma's receivers and getting them back, and you were using Clemson as the example, Phil.
Yeah, and then you hung up on me, Damon.
It was all Shane. It was all Shane.
I mean, geez, man.
I'm sorry.
But anyway, as I was saying, I was using Clemson as an example. They had the injured receiving core. Klubnik had a 19-9 ratio. Last year, they got those injured players back at receiver. They added some pieces, 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. All of a sudden, Cade Klubnik looked great. I think John Mateer steps into a great situation. They get Deion Burks back at wide receiver. They add in some pieces, like Satania coming in from Arkansas, Lewis coming in from Southern Illinois, Giovanni Gibson coming in from Arkansas Pine Bluff. Then at running back, they add in Jaden Ott, who was the best running back in the Pac-12 2 years ago. Was banged up last year, a shell of himself. He's back to 100%. Bringing in Mateer at quarterback is massive. They bring in the same offense he ran last year as Ben Arbuckle's Washington State coach. So take that with a better schedule. It's still a very difficult schedule, but more big games at home. And I think Oklahoma has a shot at actually making the playoff this year. So they are my number 1 surprise team.
I want to stay on the most improved list just for a second because as I'm perusing, you flip pages. Oh, low at number 8, 5-7 a year ago, 3-6 in the Big 12, the Cincinnati Bearcats. You like their trajectory, and it starts with Sorsby, right? What is it about the Bearcats that you like?
Oh, we lost him again.
Oh, man.
I wonder if it's the weather.
It's just like being at home, man. I talk to myself.
Yeah, I think we might have there might be a weather situation here with the phones. I'm not sure what's happening.
How does weather what do we got, down power lines or what?
I don't know. I don't really know how technology works.
What'd you say, Shane? Okay. Hey, Phil, you there? Oh, all right. So just talk to me instead of yelling, Shane, if you can. I can't hear. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate when he's on the. I mean, he's got to earn his keep somehow.
Got some technological difficulties today.
This is totally made up, but can't you just see Bill saying, "Man, that Shane, he's got to earn his keep." No, Bill wouldn't say that. Not about our liquid.
No, it's just it's one of those days, I guess.
Yeah.
We were having the camera
like
earlier.
Monica, just one of those days when I want to be all alone.
I feel like
you aren't a big Monica fan.
I'm not. No.
Yeah, more cultural.
I feel like I'm over on your references today.
Yeah, and they haven't all been minorities either. That's usually where you struggle.
No, that's not true. I like a lot of different cultural groups.
I'm just serious.
Shane,
how we doing over there, little pocket Hercules?
Okay, I'm trying. Let's try it again.
Okay.
Hello.
There he is. All right, Phil. We're gonna do better. I promise we pay our phone bills. I don't know what's going on.
I was just going to ask you about that. If you're paying your phone bill, Damon, maybe the end of the month you missed that one.
It is. It's an oversight on my part. I want to start with Sorsby and Cincinnati as they open with Nebraska. They're number 8 on your most improved.
Yeah, they're a dangerous team this year. In fact, Coach Satterfield's first 2 years, very inexperienced. First year, ton of transfers. Even last year, number 112 on my experience chart. This year, they're all the way up to number 26 on my experience chart. I like Sorsby at QB. They bring in Tyree Walker, who was at Wisconsin last year, a running back, to go along with Evan Pryor, an Ohio State transfer. At receiver, they've got plenty of talented transfers there as well with Cyrus Allen. Jeff Caldwell coming in from Lindenwood. And, the thing I found, Damon, is these FCS transfers transferring up, there's a higher percentage of hits with these guys if they have experience, more so than the P2 guys transferring down that don't have experience, because they have the experience. They come in with a great attitude. They hit the training table in the weight room, get bigger, stronger, faster, and you got yourself a great addition. So watch out for Jeff Caldwell this year. Offensive line, veteran unit. Defense, one of the best. Corleone, remember, their deep nose tackle was banged up at the start of last year, never really 100%. He's back.
He's a Sunday guy.
Yeah, he is. He's an NFL guy, and he came back to improve his stock. So this is a dangerous Cincinnati team. I do think Nebraska having the crowd edge, and I'm bullish on Nebraska this year. I think they win this game, but that's going to be a heck of a contest. And I think Cincinnati in the Big 12 is going to surprise a lot of folks this year.
So when you mentioned you're high on Nebraska, they made another one of your lists in terms of maybe the most surprising. What about Nebraska makes you bullish on them this year?
Numerous things. It's year 3 for Coach Roll. And generally it takes time to, like the offensive line, for example. The first 2 years, somewhat inexperienced. And let's face it, they've been injury-plagued. What'd they lose, like 3 starters early last year off the offensive line? They just need to keep these guys healthy. Now, all those injuries have added up, and now they've got a lot of players with experience. In fact, they've got a bunch of players that have 7 players that have 9+ career starts under their belt. So you've got a deep offensive line that can rotate. I like the addition of Dane Key, a wide receiver from Kentucky, and Hunter coming in from Cal, a wide receiver. Rayola's now a sophomore. He's going to have a much better year this year and have a better control of the offense. The running backs, I mean, once Holgerson took charge, Johnson last year had 528 yards the last 4 games, so they're dynamic there. My biggest question mark is they had a dominant defensive front, and now they're inexperienced in the defensive front 7, but I still think they'll be strong. This has been a top 25 defense the last 2 years. I like the secondary. And then when you look at the schedule, it's manageable this year. I've got them favored over Cincy, Akron, Houston Christian. I think they knock off Michigan at home on September the 20th. And then they Michigan State at home. At Maryland's winnable. Minnesota's going to be a tough test. Fleck has got an underrated squad there. I rate that one a toss-up. I rate the USC game a toss-up at home. USC was basically 5 plays away from being 11-0 last year. They lost 5 really tough close games. I don't know if Nebraska fans know anything about losing close games, but
it comes up quite a bit around here, Phil, you jokester.
Why are you bringing up old stuff, Phil?
But that was USC last year. 5 close losses, or they could have been 11-0. But other than that, I mean, at Penn State's the only game I have them a true underdog in all year. So I think Nebraska's a legitimate, when I say surprise team, that means a playoff contender. And I think the Michigan game, the Minnesota game, and the USC game are your 3 key games to determine whether or not this team has a shot at making the playoff this year. But Matt Rule with those double-digit wins second year, it wouldn't surprise me if that happens this year.
Let me stay with a team that you just mentioned in Michigan. The quarterback play is obviously huge for them. I'm with you. I think they stubbed their toe in Norman. I think Oklahoma is waiting. How do you feel about Michigan given the offseason and kind of what they've had to replace through the draft?
Yeah, first of all, they're in a lot better shape than they were last year. Last year, they lost basically the whole team. They had nobody back on the offensive line, nobody back at receiver, and the defense. Well, the defense was solid and loaded. The defense is loaded again. I mean, Derek Moore and Rashawn Benny are NFL guys up front. Barham at the linebacker spot with Hausman are both NFL caliber guys. So they have the defense. They're improved on offense. They're a good interior. Center guards, tackle is your question mark there. Wide receivers, It's sort of average. I'm not overwhelmed with the group. And they've got a true freshman quarterback in Bryce Underwood who's exciting. I think they might take a couple lumps early with the Oklahoma and the Nebraska games on the road. Then once they get into the schedule, they do get Maryland, Northwestern, Michigan State on the road. Those are all winnable. The USC is a tough one. So I think overall, they're not going to be 6-5 at the end of the year and a 3-touchdown underdog going against Ohio State. They'll be better than that. But I don't think they're going to be back to what they were 2 years ago when they were winning the national title.
Phil, I want to talk to you about another Big Ten team here with Illinois. They're a team that's been a little controversial on our show.
And Phil's a big you're a big production guy, right? You like starts in production, right, Phil?
Production and experience. And so I'm looking at, I believe, the only team in the country with a 3-year returning starter, a 3-year returning D coordinator, and a 3-year returning offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
How much do you value that when you're looking at Illinois this year?
I think it's huge. And I'm going to go back to last year's Illinois team. They were 10-3 and knocked off South Carolina, but I wasn't blown away with Illinois last year. They had some close wins during the course of the season. The Michigan game was impressive. That's one that they really had circled. In fact, the Purdue game in the second half, you could tell they were looking ahead to Michigan. They let Purdue right back in that game. But this year's Illinois team, I think, would be a touchdown favorite over last year's team. You've got veteran quarterback, as you mentioned. You got Fegan and Lowry at running back. Offensive line, I mean, Bielema knows offensive line. He's got 5 guys back who started the last half of last year. He really likes the offensive line. You look at the defense, Akis up front at the rush end, and then you got James Thompson up front. Xavier Scott and Torrey Cox are one of the best corner combinations out there. This is a legitimate Illinois team this year. I'm really looking forward to September 20th when they play at Indiana. I think that's a playoff elimination game. I think both teams are capable of making the playoffs this year. That's a big one. They host USC. 7th game of the season last year, they took on the defending national champs at home against Michigan and pulled off the upset. There was a Michigan team that lost a lot to the NFL. This year, 7th game of the season, they host Ohio State. Ohio State lost 14 players to the NFL. Keep your eyes on that one, guys. October 11th. I think we might learn a lot about Illinois in that one, but they're definitely a playoff contender this year. In fact, the Big Ten's probably got 7 or 8 playoff contenders.
I'll let you kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and I'll get to Miami in a second. I know you love Florida State with the losing record as a bounce-back candidate. I think they're number 1 in that category. Lagway comes back to practice this week. In the Sunshine State, Miami excluded, you lean Florida State, or are you taking that Gator bait?
The better team is Florida, but Florida's schedule is just ridiculous. Once again, 2nd straight year. Last year I talked to Coach Napier. I'm like, Coach, you're playing the toughest schedule in the country. He's like, it might not look as tough at the end of the year. What he meant by that is I think we're going to knock off some teams, and maybe you'll think our schedule was more reasonable. And they did. They got to 8 wins. If Lagway is healthy, they have my number 5 rated offensive line and number 10 rated defensive line. And I believe you win a lot of games at the line of scrimmage, and this team has that. But you look at Florida's schedule, they're going to be an underdog in 6 games, at LSU, at Miami, at Texas A&M, Georgia and Jacksonville, at Ole Miss. And so being an underdog in so many games in the year, it's going to be tough to improve much on the record. Meanwhile, you look at Florida State. I don't think they're as good as Florida, but when you look at their schedule, it's more reasonable, and I do think you're going to see a massive jump in the record. Now, Castellanos is at quarterback. He was recruited by Gus Malzahn, their offensive coordinator, which is a great hire, by the way. I love the hire of Gus Malzahn, and unfortunately for Nebraska fans, I also love the hire of defensive coordinator Tony White. I think he's going to do a great job there. So anyway, Castellanos was recruited by Malzahn at UCF originally. I think he's a perfect fit for the offense. This is a team that I thought went in the tank last year. They brought in so many transfers, things didn't go well, and all of a sudden they went in the tank. But Norvell's had success in the portal, both 22 and 23. I think they'll have success this year. I think they lose to Bama, but they should win their next 3 games. If they somehow beat Miami and Florida at home, and I rate that game a toss-up, then they've got Pitt, Stanford, Wake Forest. They've got a very manageable schedule down the stretch. I think you're going to see Florida State have a huge uptick record-wise, maybe get more wins in Florida. But when Florida plays Florida State in the season final, I've got the Gators a 10-point favorite.
You mentioned Alabama there briefly, and I'm fascinated with that situation this season because I'm a big Kalen DeBoer fan. Thought it was a really tricky – it would have been a tricky job for anybody to take over, but especially for him, kind of never having roots in that area necessarily. And they're breaking in a new quarterback in Ty Simpson. What do you make of Alabama this year as they try and navigate their way sort of back to the top of the SEC pack?
Yeah, they're clearly one of the best teams in the country. You look at their units. I rank every single one of their units in my top 10. And the amazing thing with DeBoer is last year, you remember when Saban left, all of a sudden a bunch of players hit the portal. This year they hardly lost anybody in the portal. That tells me that this year's team is bought in to Kalen DeBoer. He brings us back as offensive coordinator and Ryan Grubb. I think Kalen DeBoer is one of the best head coaches out there. He took a less talented Washington team to the national title game in his second year at Washington. Now he's got probably a more talented team. And I talked about quarterbacks and surrounding talent on offense. This Alabama team has got Jam Miller, Daniel Hill, Jerry Washington, Richard Young at running back. Some guy, Ryan Williams, you might have heard of him at wide receiver. The offensive line, one of the best in the country. So he doesn't have to go out and win games, but he's probably a better fit for this offense than Jalen Milroe was. You know, he distributes the ball better. I think we'll see less ups and downs than we saw with Milroe. Defensively, they're nasty. So many NFL guys on that unit. And then you look at their schedule. I only have an underdog in one game this year. That's at Georgia, and I've got a slight underdog there. They are a legitimate national title contender. And when its playoffs roll around, keep in mind, Ty Simpson won't be a first-year starting quarterback anymore. He'll have 12 games under his belt. He'll be a veteran, and that makes them very dangerous playoff time.
Oh, that Alabama-Florida State game early is intriguing. Let me get to the other one because, again, you can get two birds with one stone. I think we underappreciated Ohio State's offensive line up front, both running backs. And listen, Will Howard was better than the free world thought, in my opinion. I think they're in trouble against Texas. I can't believe Texas is catching points, especially with Texas's front four. How do you like both those teams and the significance of that opener?
Yeah, huge game. Naturally, it's not going to really matter at the end of the year because they're both going to make the playoffs. And as we saw last year with Ohio State, I mean, Ohio State didn't beat Michigan, didn't win the Big Ten, but they won the national title. And you might see that with Texas this year because you look at their road schedule this year. They have to play Georgia on the road, Ohio State on the road. They also play Florida on the road. And I think they got one more tough. Those Georgia, Texas, Florida, Oklahoma at a neutral site. So they've got some tough road games this year. But I agree with you, Damon. I like Texas in the opener. I think they are the more veteran team. In fact, I've got them rated the number one defense in the country.
I couldn't believe they're an underdog, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's the fact that Ohio State doesn't really lose at home, and Texas does have 4 new starters on the offensive line, which would be my main concern in the game. But with Ohio State, they're not as experienced as last year's team, and I know they were dominant last year, especially once the playoffs rolled around. But they're not going to have the drop-off like Michigan did, you know, going from national championship, losing 14 starters in the NFL and going down to 6-5. But they are a very solid team. They'll probably be favored in all 12 games this year. But like you, Damon, I think they with Texas, I would take them, and I like Penn State too. We'll probably talk about them in a few minutes. But I think when you look at those two games, those two teams are probably superior to Ohio State and probably get the wins there.
I'm going to say Penn State because I think I know how you feel about them. I want to go to Oregon. A lot of assumptions made about Dante Moore. And listen, Lanning recruits at a high level, wins double-digit games. He gets the benefit of the doubt. But they're replacing a ton, and there's some in-game things, too, with Lanning as well. What's your feel on the Ducks?
They're right up there in the Big Ten, no doubt about it. I love the way he recruits. I mean, the talent level they have, just going each position by position, you're like, wow. And, you know, Dante Moore sure as heck didn't impress me when he was at UCLA 2 years ago. But let's remember what the supporting cast he had and now what the supporting cast he's got here. You look at those offensive linemen he brought in. I love the addition of Matthew Bedford from Indiana, Pregnon coming in from USC, and then he's got a couple of all-conference guys, Harkey from Texas State and World from Nevada. I think he's formed a pretty good offensive line despite the fact they lose 4 starters. Dangerous at receiver with Evan Stewart and Malik Benson. Running backs are loaded. I mean, Mekhi Hughes was dominant at Tulane, and you add him to Noah Whittington. So I like the supporting cast for Dante Moore. Defensively, they've got talent. The defensive front seven looks really good. And in fact, when I look at their schedule this year, the only game I have them a true underdog in all year is at Penn State. I've got the at Iowa game as a toss-up, and I've them favored in the rest of their games. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Ducks are perhaps even in the Big Ten title game once again this year. I'd put them right up there with, I think Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon are the top 3 teams, and I believe everybody agrees with that this year.
Phil, you mentioned Penn State a couple times. Let's get to the Nittany Lions. Obviously, they made the College Football Playoff last year, but it still sort of feels like this needs to be a breakthrough year for James Franklin, as much as that can possibly make sense. How are you feeling about Penn State's ability to do that and get over the hump?
Yeah, first time 31 years in the magazine, I picked them to win it all. And, last year, I liked the fact they got that playoff experience. That was huge. They have all the pieces that Michigan had 2 years ago and Ohio State had last year, which is a veteran team, homegrown. And by the way, I'm going to do a thing on philsteele.com, a blog. It'll be the end of this week or early next week, which talks about homegrown talent and the teams that aren't relying on the transfer portal to build their teams. In other words, these guys have come in as freshmen. They're now seniors. You have used the portal like Ohio State did last year. Ohio State, most of those players were recruited as freshmen, but they did hit the portal to add to their team. Same thing what Penn State's done. And they've got the quarterback. I think Drew Lulla will have his best year in his third year. He made big-time improvement last year, going from 59% to 65%. They've got Singleton and Allen in the backfield. I feel the best set of running backs in the country, and that doesn't even includes Corey Smith and Quentin Martin, 2 true freshmen last year that got their feet wet. That's a deep running back core. I have them the number 1 offensive line in the country. And then what was their weakness? It was wide receiver last year. Well, they bring in Kyron Hudson from USC, Trevor Pena from Syracuse, and Devontae Ross from Troy. They've upgraded that unit. Defensively, there are no questions. People talk about, they've added Jim Knowles. I mean, they had a really good defense last year with Tom Allen as one of the better defense coordinators. If Knowles comes in and just gets done what happened last year, they're in good shape there. Danny Dennis, Sutton up front, Zane Durant, defensive tackle, Tony Rojas at linebacker. They've got A.J. Harris at corner, Zach Wheatley at free safety. These guys are all NFL caliber dudes. They do have to play Ohio State on the road November 1st, but they've been close to Ohio State each of the last couple of years, and I think this is the year they break through. I'm really bullish on Penn State this year. I think they got the best team in the country.
Hey, let me ask you something, Phil. You mentioned wide receivers transferring from SC, so it immediately made me think of Zakiah Branch at Georgia. Wideout has been a problem for them. I get the Bobo Stockton thing. How's that going to work as he matures? It seems like Georgia, for as Georgia can be, flying under the radar. Legit, fair, foul. How are you feeling about the Bulldogs?
Clearly under the radar.
It seems like it.
Yeah, and the whole reason is they don't have the marquee talent returning from last year, but they have a lot of guys returning from last year. So, and here's the thing. Georgia last year was everybody's number 1 coming into the season, right? And then Georgia last year had to play Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss all on the road, and they lost 2 of those games. They still ended up winning the SEC title, but then they got their quarterback banged up and lost in the first round of the playoffs to Notre Dame. Well, this year, Georgia's 3 toughest opponents are Alabama, Mississippi, and Texas. But they get them all at home, between the hedges. And they haven't lost a game at home between the hedges in 5 years. They're undefeated at home. I think Stockton brings mobility to the running back core, as you mentioned, Damon. They've upgraded the receivers. They bring in Branch from USC, Kobe Young from Miami of Florida, Noah Thomas from Texas A&M, London Humphreys. Yeah, Thomas is a big-time pickup, I think. The offensive line looks solid, and defensively, every year I go over the team with them. They are so deep. I mean, their third string are 5-star guys back there. So I have no doubts about their defense. And they had Elo Amadozi coming in from Army, which I think would be a big-time pickup, a rare transfer from there. So I actually have Georgia favored in all 12 games and picked them at the top of the SEC this year. So they are well under the radar. Nobody's talking about them because they don't have the star power.
Can you envision a world, and I'll let you talk about Miami before I get a couple conference predictions from you, where Florida State, Florida, and Miami are all relevant? It sounds like you like Florida's potential, Florida State to turn it around. Are you believing in Cristobal as he just continues to procure talent, but maybe underachieve a little bit? You in on the Canes?
Yeah, I think they're right up there. In fact, their game at SMU on November 1st is going to determine whether or not they get to the ACC title game. And they're going to give Notre Dame a heck of a game in the opener. Now, quarterback Carson Beck is not going to be Cam Ward, but he is pretty good quarterback, and he's got a good supporting cast. You look at the offensive line. When I went over it with Cristobal, he feels it's outstanding, one of the best ones he's had. You look at the defense that they have. Reuben Bain and Akeem Messidor are dynamic defensive ends. They're going to get a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks. So this is a very talented Miami roster. And Cristobal keeps adding to it. I think when I was on the phone with him, he's like, Phil, I got to take it. It's recruit. Phil, I got to take this. It's a recruit. I'm like waiting. And I was like, come on, coach. But that's how it shows you how important recruiting is nowadays. But they get Florida at home. They do play Florida State on the road, which I think is a big game. But I think the SMU game determines whether or not they're in the ACC title game this year. They don't have to play Clemson, which is a big plus for them. They're a dangerous squad. I think one of the top teams in the country.
Is that Notre Dame Miami game still less than the key number? Is it 2.5? It was less than 3 when I looked. It's still less than the key number, right?
Yeah, I believe it's 2, and that's probably where it should be since Miami's at home, heat and humidity and all that stuff.
New quarterback,
and they are a
at
pretty
Notre
good
Dame.
team, and new quarterback making a start, and you got Reuben Bain and Messidor racing in off the edge. So I think an accurate line. You make it 3, you're going to get Miami money. You make it pick 'em, you're going to get Notre Dame money.
Phil, let me ask you this: out of the teams that are considered the top contenders for the College Football Playoff, who do you have the most questions about?
Well, throw out the teams that you're considering.
I mean, so like Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Clemson, Notre Dame. Let's go with those 8.
Well, those are the 8 that I would consider as the top contenders this year. Biggest question marks. I would say I'm going to go with Ohio State just due to the experience level. They are one of the, they lost a lot from last year. And last year's team, they had so many players turn down the NFL opt to return. Now all those guys are gone. They do have a first-year starting quarterback. There's no doubting the talent they have. But hell, last year's really, really talented Ohio State team lost 2 games during the regular season, for crying out loud. Didn't even make it to the Big Ten title game. They do have a schedule. It's laid out. Like I said, they will be favored in all 12 of their games. But do they win all 12 of the games is the question. So I'm going to say the biggest question mark is Ohio State due to the fact of what they lost last year.
Let me get you out of here on this. It's a convoluted. It's a crowded conference, right? 4.5 wins is the lowest. 8.5 wins is the highest in the Big 12. It seems like Arizona State should be the prohibitive favorite with what they bring back. Yet I kind of feel like they're not. When you look at the Big 12, and it's a 2 question, who's the best team in the Big 12? And if you were going to take a dark horse, is it Baylor or Texas Tech between those 2? Who wins the conference, and who's a legitimate dark horse in the Big 12?
Well, I'll tell you, there are 7 teams that I consider legitimate contenders, and they are Baylor, Utah, Iowa State.
Utah's
Arizona
on your most
State.
improved, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Much different Utah team. Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, and TCU. All those guys are there. And what I did is I went by the schedules. Texas Tech, they added so much talent with the transfer portal to an already experienced team. But Joey McGuire is 15-5 at home. He's 6-10 on the road, and they have to play at Utah, at Arizona State, at Kansas State. So I'm like, can they win those 3 games against teams that are equally talented? You look at Baylor's road schedule. They're playing at Oklahoma State. They are playing Cincinnati, which I think is much improved. But they also play Arizona on the road and TCU on the road. So a much more manageable road schedule. Baylor's home schedule, they get Utah at home. They get Kansas State at home. They get Arizona State at home. Same thing with Utah. You look at their road schedule. It's West Virginia, BYU, Kansas, and then Baylor is the one tough team they play on the road. But I'll say this about Utah. When I talked to Kyle Whittingham, he said this is the best offensive line he has had in his 21 years. And he's had some really good offensive lines. Remember last year, the question mark with Utah was, is Rising going to play? Is Rising not going to play? And when he finally did play midseason, he looked poor in that game. And then the last 2 games of the season, they're starting a 5th-string quarterback. This year, they bring in Devin Dampier from New Mexico, who did more with less. I mean, you look at the talent New Mexico had last year. There is no way I could have forecast the amount of points New Mexico put up. Dampier had a great year. and he's got a better supporting cast here at Utah than he had with that offensive line with good running backs. And their defense is solid. The special teams is solid. And they get the toughest games. They get Texas Tech at home. They get Arizona State at home. They get Kansas State at home. And with Muss, the student section, that's one tough place to go in and win. I think Utah is going to surprise a lot of folks. But watch Iowa State. I talked about that homegrown thing that I'm going to put up, the homegrown blog. That's Iowa State. They don't use the portal very much, but they don't lose players. All these guys have stayed. They bought in. And there was a point last year where I thought Iowa State was the best team in the Big 12. They ended up losing to Texas Tech on a late play. They lost to Kansas, but overall, they were really one of the top teams. And one of the reasons that they lost those games is the defense really got hit hard by injuries. In fact, when I talked to Coach Campbell, he was just rattling off the injuries, guys that were out for the year, or guys that were out for the end of the season. And I think with the improved defense, with Rocco Beck, the QB, with the best offensive line he's put on the field, watch for Iowa State this year. That's probably your best value if you're looking for a way down pick to win the Big 12 this year. You probably get your best odds on Iowa State.
All right, I'll get you out of here. I appreciate your time, Phil. 2 quickies. Belief factor. Do you like Cignetti for a repeat performance or Minnesota to be more of that thorn in the side if you're looking for a team coming from off the grid in the Big Ten? Indiana, Minnesota.
Indiana's going to have the better record. And I'll be honest with you, Damon, prior to my call with Coach Cignetti, I'm like, well, they lost a lot from last year. And then after going over the team with them and going player by player, I think this year's team might be more talented than last year's squad. But the difference is last year they were playing UCLA, Northwestern, Michigan State on the road. This year they're playing Iowa, Oregon, Penn State on the road. So a tougher road schedule. Maybe tough to match last year's record, but I think they're the better team of the two. But the thing with PJ Fleck is every year he overachieves my expectations, finishes higher than I expect. I think they're going to get good quarterback play out of Drake Lindsey. I like Darius Taylor at running back. The defense is solid. I think Minnesota's going to have a good year, but Indiana is the better team and will have the slightly better year than Minnesota.
All right. And I get it. Mullins had a ton of success. Can he do it building what he's done at UNLV? I mean, that's every four-star retread imaginable, man. He's built it with talent.
That is my big question mark this year is exactly that, because as I mentioned, there's been a high, and I talked to Coach Mullen about this prior to the conversation. Before I went over the roster with him, I said, Coach, I find that there's a higher percentage of hits with these FCS or group of 5 guys moving up than there is with the big guys coming down. And he was sort of silent. And then I went through the roster with him. I'm like, oh, that's why. Because he had so many players that were coming in from the P5. And I'm like, Coach, good luck. I mean, these guys don't have a lot of experience. You know what I mean? So can he get them to play up to their talent level? He was very confident when I talked to him that he was going to get these guys to play up to their talent level. But I have question marks about that, because going through rosters, I have found a higher percentage of hits with the lower guys moving up than the higher guys moving down.
Gotcha.
That's our
fantastic
guy, Phil
stuff,
Steele. Incredible, the best in the biz. Phil, we appreciate the time. Make sure you get to philsteele.com or go buy the magazine. I got mine at Barnes & Noble personally.
Let's get it.
But, Phil, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks, guys. Always enjoy the conversations. You only hung up on me a couple of times, so I can handle that, though. Hey. But, yeah, the magazines, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million are the 2 brick-and-mortar places to go look for it, or philsteele.com. What were you going to say, Damon?
Low bar to be better for next year, Phil. That's all. Low bar. Appreciate you.
Right. Hey, a lot of fun as always, guys.
Thanks, Phil.
That is Phil Steele. Make sure you go pick up a magazine. I got mine right here in my backpack.
Did he scare you more with Minnesota or Cincy? Neither. That's a 10-win Nebraska team, DB. All right, then. Young Ravi.
I didn't see anything on Saturday that led me to believe anything different.
Yeah, I think some people kind of change, which is interesting because it's only one practice of a lot, and it was the first full one in pads.
Think about how much more information we have now than we did before.
Yeah.
So that's the other side of the coin.
Got a little something.
If you're looking for information, make sure you get to centrusfcu.org. They've got financial education for you, whether you're looking for lighthearted advice from vetted experts or want to learn on your own. Centrus Federal Credit Union has you covered with the financial education sources right at your fingertips. Go check them out, centrusfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA. We'll be back. More Hurrdat Sports Live.
Yeah, And with that depth, of course, comes competition in the position groups. Let's start with the libero position. Obviously, with Lexi Rodriguez's departure, who takes over that spot? And Jacob, in your eyes, who are the couple front runners here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the two main position battles, like there's competition everywhere, but the two ones that are probably most up for grabs right now are